Hi, and welcome to this section of the Basic Math Word Problem Tutor. And in this section, we're going to continue on with percents. In the last section, we learned that a percent is really just expressing something compared to 100. So it's a fraction with 100 in the denominator. And it can also be used to express a decimal by moving the decimal points. And so the problems there were dealing with things like, here's this many people in a room, these many people have a yellow hat on, what percent of those people have a yellow hat on, and then you did the math to figure that out. Here we're going to continue using the same ideas of percents, but the problems will have a slightly different flavor, and rather than just explain what that flavor is, let's go ahead and just start working the problems. You already have the skills to do these problems, but we're going to practice them here, okay? In a classroom, there are 30 students. If 50% of them are boys, how many are boys in the class? So this is a little bit different because you're not asked to find the percent, you're actually given the percent, and you're told that you have 30 students and 50% are boys. How many boys are in the class? Okay, so what we know is we have 30 whole students and 50%, which would mean that 50 out of 100 of them are boys. How many boys do we have? Well, don't forget that when you have 50% of something, okay, that can be expressed as 50 over 100, which we've already talked about. It can also be expressed as a decimal, which is taking this decimal and moving it two places, 0.50. That is a decimal representation of this percent. Okay, so if we have, and the problem actually says 50%, I'm just going to write it here, of the class are boys. Okay, this 50% of is usually a keyword for multiplication, and in this case it is too. So what we're going to have is 30 people in class, and we're going to multiply it by the 50%, because 50% is telling us how many people in the class are actually boys in terms of percent, but you can't multiply by 50 because this is a percentage, and this little percent symbol doesn't really do anything for you when you multiply. You need to use the decimal equivalent to actually do this multiplication. That's why I've been teaching you the decimal equivalent. So I'm going to put 0.50. This leading zero, you can drop it, any 0.25, 0.55, whatever. This leading zero really doesn't do anything for you, so you don't have to carry that around in your problems. Just put 0.50, okay? And then you can go ahead and do it here, okay? So let's go ahead and multiply. Okay, remember how to multiply your decimals. So now this entire problem reduced down to this multiplying decimal. Okay, 0 times 0 gives you 0. 0 times 3 gives you 0. Okay, moving on to this one, you have to put a 0 over here to continue multiplying. 5 times 0 gives you 0. 5 times 3 gives you 15. Okay? All right, so now you add. To do it, go ahead and finish your multiplication out. 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 0 is 0, 5 plus blank is just 5, and 1 plus the blank, which is same as 0, is a 1, 5 there. And so you have to figure out where to put your decimal. You go back to your problem, and you see, where are my decimals? I've got decimal here, I've got 2 spots after the decimal, no decimals here, so I have to have 2 spots after the decimal in my final answer. So the answer is 15.00, and as you know, zeros after a decimal point can be dropped. So the answer is 15 people are boys in the class. Okay, 15 people are boys. So really all you did was you multiply by 0.50 there, and you just get a number that's 15.00, and you can drop these zeros because 272 is the same as 272.00, so you can just drop those zeros there, and they don't really mean anything. So 15 people in the class were boys, and you knew to do that because your percentage told you how many people out of 100 were boys, and so you're applying that to the class that you have here by doing this multiplication. Okay, and you're getting the answer there. Okay, so when you generally want to find out how many of something there is, and you know the percentage, you just multiply by the decimal form, and then you get the answer. Okay. So the next problem is similar, and it says your friend weighed 140 pounds, but then he lost 10 pounds of his weight due to exercise. How many pounds did he lose? Okay. So he weighed 140 pounds, but he lost 10% of his weight, and that means 10 out of every 100 pounds he had, he lost. He lost 10 pounds out of every 100 he had. but he didn't have 100 pounds to begin with, he had 140. So you just need to multiply these two together, but when you do the multiplication, you just need to use the decimal form of 10%. Okay? So you know that 10% is the same as 10 over 100, right? And you also know that this can be expressed as a decimal by moving the decimal point 2 places, so it's 0.10. So all you need to do to find out how much weight he lost is take 140 pounds and multiply it by 0.10, which is basically what's describing how much weight he has lost. You do not multiply by 10 because that percent here, I mean, this is just a symbol. This percent symbol means you move the decimal point here. The real number is 0.1, and that's why you're multiplying by that here. So let's do this. 0 times 0 is 0. 0 times 4 is 0. 0 times 1 is 0. Moving to the next one, I'm going to add a 0 down here to continue multiplying. 1 times 0 gives me 0. 1 times 4 gives me 4. 1 times 1 gives me 1. And I'm going to add. When I do this, I'm going to get 0 here, 0 here. 4 plus 0 is 4. And then this 1 just drops right on down. And then I need to figure out where to put my decimal. There are no decimals here. And I've got a decimal here with 2 places after the decimal. So I have to have 2 places after the decimal in my final answer. So I lost 14.00 pounds. Okay? But these two decimals here, these two digits here after this decimal point really don't add anything, so I've just lost 14 pounds. These two things mean the same thing. Okay? So somebody that weighed 140 pounds and lost 10% of their weight, you just use this decimal form of this percent and multiply using the same rules of multiplication for decimals, and then you get the 14 pounds that you lost. That is how much you lost. Okay, the next problem says a DVD costs $20 at regular price, but it has a sticker on it that says 15% off. This is sales sticker, okay? How much money off of the regular price will you get? So in other words, if something costs $20, but it says 15% off, how much money do you save, okay? So it's the same thing here. 15% off means 15 out of every $100, right? But this thing doesn't cost $100. It only costs $20. So the way to find out how much money you save is to multiply the price times the percentage off, but you got to use the decimal form of this percentage off, and then you get an answer. That's how much money you save, okay? So 15% means 15 over 100. I just keep writing this here for you so that you can just continue to remember that this is what it means. And in terms of a decimal, all you do is take this implied decimal here and move it 2 spots to the left, so you have 0.15. This is the decimal form of 15%. In order to find out how much off you get, you just multiply by 20. And then this multiplied by 20 is going to be how much money off you save. Okay? So let's do that. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 2 is 10. Moving to the next digit, I have to add a 0 here. 1 times 0 gives me 0. 1 times 2 gives me 2. And I add these two things together. 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. 1 plus 2 is 3. And now I need to find out where to put the decimal point. And up here I have no decimal points. Up here I have a decimal with 2 digits after the decimal. So I must have 2 digits after the decimal in my final answer. So I saved $3.00, which is what the 0.00 means. You could drop these here and just say you saved $3. That's fine. I saved $3 off. So if the thing initially cost me $20, but I saved $3, then the actual price I pay is 20 minus 3, which is $17. That's the price it's going to ring up at the register. And you see why this stuff is very useful, because when you're in the store, lots of times you'll see that something is 25% off and 30% off. And if you don't have any idea what that means, then you'll never know if you're actually saving money when you get to the register. So you need to know this stuff. Okay. The next problem says, in a box of 55 chocolates, 40% have nuts. How many of these chocolates have nuts? It's the same form as everything else. You have a box of 55 chocolates. You know that 40%, which means 40 out of every 100 chocolates, have nuts. How many have nuts? So you're using this and you want to multiply these together, but you want to use the decimal form of 40% to do that. So 40% is the same thing as 40 over 100 as a fraction, and as a decimal you just move it 2 times to the left, 0.40. That is what 40% is in terms of a decimal. And to find out how many of these things have nuts, you just multiply by your decimal, which is 0.4. You're multiplying here. So let's do that. 0 times 5 is 0. 0 times 5 is 0. Moving to this one, I have to put a 0 here. 4 times 5 is 20. Put the 0, carry the 2. 4 times 5 over here is 20, plus the 2 gives me 22. So now I add. Okay, now I add. 0 plus 0 gives me 0. 0 plus 0 gives me 0. 2 plus 0 gives me 2. 2 plus 0 gives me 2. And now I need to figure out where to put this decimal. So I have 2 spots after the decimal. So I must have 2 spots after the decimal here. So it's 22.00. Chocolates have the nuts, but this 0.00 doesn't really add anything. So what you say is you have 22 chocolates have nuts. 22 of the chocolates have nuts. And that kind of makes sense because if 55 chocolates, 40% of them have nuts, that means that almost 50%, which 50% is a half, it's almost half of these chocolates have nuts. So out of 55 of them, 22 actually have nuts. And we arrive at that by multiplying by this number, which tells us how many out of every 100 of them have nuts. Okay, the next problem says a book costs $19 plus 5% sales tax. What is the total cost of the book, including the tax? Okay, so what we know is the book costs $19, and 5% of that price is the tax. So what we need to do is calculate the tax, okay, and then add it to the price of the book, and that will give us the total amount we actually have to pay. Because sales tax is a percentage of the price of the item, and then you add those two things together, and that's how much it actually costs, including the tax. So since it's 5% sales tax, 5% is expressed as 5 over 100. I'm just drilling that in. But as a decimal, you want to move it 2 times. One time would be 0.5. In order to move it again, you have to put 0.05, okay? Because I moved it from here 2 places, okay? 0.05. So let's multiply that by the price of the book to find out how much tax we have. Multiply by 0.05. Okay? I'm multiplying the price times the tax in terms of a decimal to find out how much tax we have. Starting with this. 5 times 9 is 45. Put the 5, carry the 4. 5 times 1 is 5. Plus 4 is 9. Now moving to the next one. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is move over here and start multiplying by this guy, so I have to put a 0 here. 0 times 9 is 0, and 0 times 1 is 0. And I don't have to do anything with this 4 because this only applied when I was multiplying by the 5. So as 0 times 9 gives me 0, 0 times 1 gives me 0. I add these together, and of course I'm going to get 95 here because adding all this up just gives me 95 because I'm adding 0 to it. And now I need to figure out where to put this decimal. This decimal, I only have one here, and I have 2 digits after the decimal. So I need to put my decimal here, which is telling me that I have 2 digits after the decimal. So what it's telling me is the price of the book was $19, so 0.95 cents was tax. Okay, so you can say $0.95, or you can say 95 cents, or however you want to say it, but this is how much tax I had. So in order to find out what the total price was, I'm going to add $19 to 95 cents to find out how much money I have to pay total. And of course, I think you realize 5 plus 0 is 5, 9 plus 0 is 9, decimal point for addition comes straight down, and then 9 plus 0 is 9, 1 plus 0 is 1. So the total price is $19.95 for the book plus the tax. So I multiplied the price of the book times the tax rate to give me how much tax we had. You add the tax to the price of the book, and then you get the total price, $19.95. Okay, now our final problem says, on a 60 question exam, the student scored a grade of 85%. Okay, how many questions did the student miss? Okay, it's very important that you understand what this is asking you. 60-question test, student scored a grade of 85%. How many questions did he miss? Don't forget, when you score a grade on a test, 85, 90, 75, whatever you get, it's in terms of a percentage. So you see, you've always dealt with percentages all your life. When you get an 85 on a test, that means that out of every 100 questions, you got 85 correct, okay? Now, your test may not have 100 questions. It's just telling you that if it did, you would have gotten 85 correct. It's a way to compare everybody equally, okay? So this problem is not asking how many did you get correct. This problem is saying how many did you miss. So what we have to do is find out how many questions we actually got right, and then we subtract that from the number of questions on the test, and that will be the number of questions that we actually got wrong. So going back to the basics here, 85% means 85 over 100. Okay, that's what it means. And in terms of a decimal, you move it to the left 2 spaces. We've been doing this all during the entire lesson, 0.85. Now, in order to find out how many correct, all we have to do is multiply the total number of questions on the test times the percentage that we got right, which is exactly what your grade is how many percent you got right. And the answer we get is going to be the number of correct answers. And then we'll go from there. So let's do it. 5 times 0 gives me 0. 5 times 6 is 30. Okay. I'm going to move along here, so I have to put a 0. 8 times 0 gives me 0. 8 times 6 is 48. And I'm going to add these. 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. 3 plus 8, starting at 8, 9, 10, 11. Got a 1, carry a 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. So I've got 5100. I need to figure out where to put this decimal. And I have a decimal here with 2 digits after. So in the final answer, I need to have 2 digits after the decimal. Now notice that these digits after here, after this decimal, are just 0. So what this means is I got 51 questions correct. Because you can ignore any zeros after a decimal point. So I got 51 correct. But the question doesn't ask that. It says how many did he miss. So it's a simple thing to say how many questions did he miss. I take the 60 questions on the test and I subtract the 51 questions that he got correct, and that will be how many he missed. So let's do that. What is 60 minus 51? Starting in this column. 0 minus 1, I can't really do it, so I borrow. I make it a 10, I make him a 5. Okay? So now what 10 minus 1, I think you all know, is 9. And 5 minus 5 is 0, so I don't even have to put him. So 9 questions missed. Okay? So this is really useful stuff. Here you have 60 questions on a test. You score a grade of 85, which is 85%. And we multiplied by 85% in terms of the decimal to find out how many questions he got correct. And then after we knew how many he got correct, we subtracted from the number of questions on the test to find how many he actually missed. So this section concludes our word problems with percents. And you can see it's really not that difficult. You just need to know that a percent is comparing something to 100 in terms of a fraction. You can also write it in terms of a decimal. And frequently you'll need to multiply that by the number of students in class or by something to find out what you need to find out. And in this case, we were talking about the number of questions he got incorrect on a test. Other cases, it might be how many red crayons are in a crayon box. It could be how many number of sunny days in the year. It could be anything. When you know the percentage of something, you know how many out of 100 that is. What is that compared to 100? And you can use that, like in the case of the tax. You know, since it's 5% tax, that if you multiply the price times 5% in terms of decimal, that will be what the tax is. So you can use this to tackle your problems in terms of percents and get some really great practice and be very, very confident in word problems that deal with percents.